When saving money quietly destroys your life, what if I told you that saving money, the very thing we're taught is virtuous, responsible, and even morally superior, might be the silent architect of your own unhappiness? That beneath the spreadsheet cells of your budget, the discounted purchases, and the justifications for every dollar withheld, there is something quietly eroding your spirit. That the life you think you're protecting through frugality may actually be the one you're surrendering inch by inch without realizing. Let me hook you right now. This isn't a rant against financial responsibility. It's not some reckless call to live lavishly or spend impulsively. No, this is about something deeper, a philosophical trap that many of us fall into without ever recognizing it. It begins with good intentions. You want to be smart, prepared, intentional. You cut back on dining out. You downgrade your wardrobe. You skip trips. You defer dreams. And it feels good at first. There's a sense of control. You feel above the chaos of consumerism. You're not like them. You're disciplined. You're future-focused. But here's the haunting question. What is the real cost of constantly deferring joy in the name of future security? Because every time you say not now, you're making a trade. You're sacrificing a moment of living, of being, for a version of you that doesn't yet exist. And what if that version never arrives?
Click subscribe to this channel to get more topics you love.
I've met people who saved for decades only to die within a year of retirement. People who postponed travel, creativity, or even love until the time was right, only to realize that time is never right unless you make it right. And maybe you know someone like that. Maybe you are someone like that. So ask yourself right now, what are you saving for? And what are you losing while you wait? We often don't realize how saving can become a kind of spiritual hoarding, not just of money, but of potential. We hoard our desires, our passions, our adventures. We convince ourselves that restraint is synonymous with wisdom, but restraint without purpose is just imprisonment with better PR. And here's the philosophical crux. Are you saving money, or are you saving fear? Think about it. Saving feels safe. It gives you a sense of control in a world that is fundamentally uncontrollable. But life in its essence is not meant to be controlled. It is meant to be experienced fully, vividly, and sometimes even recklessly, because the pursuit of total safety is the enemy of freedom. And when you prioritize safety over meaning, you build a life that looks good on paper but feels hollow in your soul. I remember talking to a man who told me he drove the same car for 20 years to save money. That sounds noble, right? But he also told me he never took his kids on a road trip, never visited a national park, never let them roll down the windows and scream into the wind as they crossed state lines on a summer night. He saved money, but he lost moments. So what do you really drive, or a coffin for your memories? This is where it gets personal. Because I used to be addicted to saving. It wasn't about greed. It was about fear. Fear of being broke. Fear of losing status. Fear of not being good enough. So I clung to money like it was my identity. But money is not identity. How you use money is identity. You can save a fortune and still be spiritually bankrupt. Or you can spend wisely with intention and be rich in ways no bank account can measure. Have you ever noticed how we idolize minimalism and frugality, but rarely interrogate the why behind them? We love stories of people who live on $7,000 a year, but we don't ask what they're missing. We assume less is always more. But sometimes, less is just less. And if your minimalism is rooted in fear, not freedom, then it's just another form of scarcity. Are you simplifying your life, or are you shrinking it? The truth is, saving money is a tool. But like any tool, It can become a weapon, especially when it turns inward. You start cutting not just expenses, but experiences. You save by not going to the wedding, not buying the instrument, not taking the class, not saying yes. And over time, your world gets smaller. You become a curator of missed opportunities. You tell yourself you're being smart, but really you're just scared. And here's the most dangerous part. Society will praise you for it. They'll call you wise, disciplined, mature. But maturity is not just about restraint. It's about discernment, knowing when to hold back and when to leap, when to save and when to spend, not just money, but time, energy, and passion. So let me ask you something radical. What would happen if you stopped saving for a moment and started living? What if you used your money, not all of it, but some of it, to create beauty, connection, memories? What if you treated money not as a shield, but as a brush with which to paint a masterpiece of a life? We think of money as something to accumulate. But what if its real value is in how it moves through us, how it lets us move through the world? Because static money is dead money, and static lives are graves disguised as comfort zones. I'm not saying spend recklessly. I'm asking you to spend consciously, to save with a purpose, not just for retirement, but for richness of life, of love, of experience. Because when you die, your bank account dies with you, but your memories, the ones you made, and the ones you gave, those ripple forever. So next time you hesitate to spend on something that lights you up, ask yourself, am I saving money or am I sacrificing meaning? The psychology of scarcity, why we mistake safety for success, we rarely question it, the deep unconscious belief that the safer we are, the more successful we must be. That financial security equals life security. But what if that's one of the greatest illusions ever sold to us? What if, in our endless pursuit of safety, we've mistaken the cage for the castle? Let's go deeper. At the core of our attachment to saving lies something ancient, the psychology of scarcity. It's primal, it's tribal. We evolved in environments where resources were limited, winters were brutal, and survival depended on keeping something, anything, for later. So we adapted. We learned to store, to ration, to delay. We became masters of preparation. And in many ways, that psychology still serves us today. But the problem is, we've carried that survival instinct into a world where the dangers are no longer tigers in the woods, but fears inside our minds. And the result? We act like we're still in survival mode, even when we've already survived. Scarcity is no longer about food or shelter. It's about self-worth. It's about identity. It's about this subtle but constant feeling that we are not enough, or that we don't have enough, and therefore we cannot be enough. So we compensate. We save not just money, but possibilities. We save our dreams for later, our adventures for when things calm down, our creativity until we can afford the time. We imprison life in the name of preparation. But here's the philosophical paradox. How do you prepare for a life that only exists when you stop preparing for it? Scarcity doesn't just shape your bank account, it shapes your worldview. It makes you see life as a zero-sum game. It teaches you that every choice is a risk, that pleasure is a luxury, that joy is something earned rather than allowed. You begin to think like a prisoner, even when the door is unlocked. And the more you save, the more afraid you become of losing what you've saved. It's a trap, a perfectly logical trap. And the smarter you are, the deeper you fall into it, because you can always rationalize it. You tell yourself, once I hit this number, I'll feel secure. Once I pay off this debt, I'll take that trip. Once the economy stabilizes, I'll invest in that idea. But there's always another threshold. Another reason to wait. Another excuse dressed as wisdom. And while you're waiting, your life is burning quietly, invisibly, like a candle in a sealed jar. No wind, no flame. Just slow, suffocating stillness. And let's be honest, society doesn't help. We're bombarded with messages that glorify grind culture, delayed gratification, and hyper-responsibility. We post memes about hustle now, relax later, but what if later never comes? What if the greatest lie is that sacrifice automatically leads to reward? Because sometimes, all sacrifice gets you is a life of sacrifice. Here's a question that might shake you. Are you saving money to build a life, or are you building a life around the act of saving money? It's subtle, but the distinction matters. One is intentional. The other is reactive. One is rooted in meaning. The other is rooted in fear. And fear has a way of disguising itself as logic. It whispers, "Be careful," when what it really means is, "Stay small." It says, "Be prepared," when it really means, "Don't take the leap." And the truth is, you can't outsave fear. You can't budget your way into courage. At some point, you have to make the jump. Think about the people who've inspired you most. Were they the ones who played it safe? Or the ones who risked something? The ones who used their resources, however limited, to create, to connect, to live boldly? The ones who understood that safety isn't the ultimate goal. Aliveness. And here's the kicker. The more you act from scarcity, the more scarcity you create. Not just financially, but emotionally, relationally, spiritually. You say no to the dinner with friends because you want to save. But in doing so, you lose connection. You skip the concert, the trip, the moment, and in doing so, you lose vitality. You start building a fortress around yourself, but forget that fortresses are also prisons. So what's the alternative? Not recklessness, but alignment. Spending not from impulse, but from clarity. Asking yourself, does this choice expand my life or contract it? Because that's the real metric of success. Not how much you save, but how fully you live. Not how safe you are, but how awake you are. Not what you protect, but what you offer to the world through your presence, your passions, your willingness to show up. You don't need $1 million to live richly. You need intention. You need courage. You need to stop waiting for the right time and start recognizing that the right time is simply the moment you stop letting fear make your decisions. Ask yourself this: if you died tomorrow, would your savings be a monument to your fear or a tool you once used to build something beautiful? The illusion of deferred dreams. How we bargain with time and lose. We've all done it. We've all said not now, but soon. And we meant it. We believed in that mythical later, a time when things would be easier, safer, more convenient. We told ourselves that if we just waited, if we just held on a little longer, life would finally give us permission to begin. But here's the brutal truth. Later is a lie we tell ourselves to feel better about saying no to now. This is the most dangerous illusion of all, the belief that time is something we can negotiate with, that it's patient, that it will wait for us while we save, prepare, and plan. But time is not a business partner. Time doesn't care about your spreadsheets or your intentions. Time is the one currency that only moves in one direction, and it's always being spent, whether you're ready or not. We think we're being strategic when we delay our dreams. We call it being practical. We say we'll travel when we retire, write the book when the kids are older, start the business when the market is right. But the problem isn't that we're waiting, it's that we're waiting without living. We're making deals with time as if it owes us a refund. But time, like life, doesn't make deals. It just keeps moving. The tragedy is how convincing the deferral logic can be. It feels rational to wait. It feels responsible. But responsibility without joy is just another form of slow death. You don't become noble by postponing your dreams. You become numb. And numbness is the most dangerous state of all, because it makes you forget that you were ever passionate in the first place. How many people do you know, or how many times have you said something like, "I've always wanted to," followed by a dream that's been sitting on the shelf so long it's collecting dust? A country you've wanted to visit, a language you've wanted to learn, a person you've wanted to reach out to, a vision you saw once vivid and electric that now feels like a foggy memory. We don't abandon our dreams all at once. We bury them gradually under layers of not yet. And then one day, we look up and realize we don't even remember what they looked like. Here's a radical question. What if dying with money in the bank but dreams in the grave is the ultimate failure? We live in a culture obsessed with legacy, but what is legacy if it's not lived experience? What is wealth if it's not translated into aliveness? You can't take your savings with you, but you can leave behind a trail of moments that mattered. Not just for you, but for the people you touched, inspired, and awakened by choosing not to wait. And yet, we fear indulgence. We fear being seen as impulsive or irresponsible. So we make a virtue out of hesitation. But hesitation is not a virtue, it's a form of escape. It's a way of avoiding the raw, terrifying act of committing to what sets your soul on fire. Because committing means risking, and risking means losing. But here's the paradox. By refusing to risk loss, we guarantee it. You see, the illusion isn't just in the delay, it's in the belief that time will one day give us certainty. That there will come a perfect moment when the stars align, the fear vanishes, and the path becomes clear. But clarity comes from action, not before it. You don't wait for the fog to lift you, walk into it. You move despite not knowing what's on the other side. Because living isn't about certainty, it's about participation. Ask yourself this. What have you already postponed that your future self will mourn? The trip you didn't take, the words you didn't say, the risk you didn't dare, the life you didn't live. We think we're being wise by waiting, but often we're just being afraid. And fear has a way of disguising itself as logic. It tells you to wait when what you really need is to leap. The irony is that the dreams we delay are often the very things that would bring us the energy, clarity, and motivation we're waiting for. We think we need to feel ready first, but readiness isn't a prerequisite, it's a result. It happens after you begin, not before. So don't wait for permission. Don't wait for the bank account to hit a number or the calendar to hit a date. Don't wait for time to say go, because it already has. Every second you're alive is an invitation, a call to stop bargaining with time and start dancing with it, to stop stacking dreams like poker chips and start cashing them in while your hands still work and your heart still beats. Because in the end, you won't remember how much you saved. You'll remember how much you lived. The final reckoning, what legacy really means when you're gone legacy. It's the word we whisper to ourselves late at night when the noise quiets and the vanity fades. It's what we hope will remain when the body fails and the name begins to fade. But ask yourself honestly, what do you think your legacy will be? A number in an account, a house, a few cautious memories, or something deeper, something that breathes long after you do? At the end of your life, no one will read your bank statements at your funeral. No one will applaud your frugality. No one will say he really knew how to skip dessert. They will talk about how you made them feel. What you gave with your time, your presence, your laughter. The risks you took that inspired others. The generosity you showed when you didn't have to. The courage you summon when it would have been easier to hide and save and stall. That's the real reckoning. Legacy is not what you leave behind, but what you leave within others. And you can't deposit that in a savings account. You can't accumulate it through caution. You have to live it into existence. You have to choose, moment by moment, to invest in what matters, not just in what's secure. We've been taught to believe that legacy is built through hard work, savings, and careful planning. But those are just the bones. The soul of a legacy is experience. It's the life you lived so fully that it ripples into other lives. It's the stories people tell about your boldness, your compassion, your unmistakable presence. It's not about how much you owned, but how much you opened your heart, your mind, your time. And here lies the final philosophical twist. Death doesn't care how much you saved, but it will reflect how much you spent, not your dollars, but your days. There's a haunting truth that we avoid. Most people save their lives. Not live, save. They compress their joy into weekends, their love into holidays, their dreams into someday. And someday becomes never. They save their best selves for the right moment, which rarely arrives. And when it does, they're too tired, too anxious, or too far gone to recognize it. So what if you stopped trying to preserve your life like a precious artifact and started using it like the greatest tool you've ever been given? What if the point isn't to stretch out life as long as possible, but to stretch into it as fully as you can? We're all going to die. That's not morbid, that's clarifying. Because when you remember that fact, you realize that saving money isn't inherently noble. It's what you're saving it for that matters. Are you saving it to avoid discomfort, or to fund a life that's bursting with meaning? Are you saving out of fear or from a place of love and purpose? Let's flip the script. What if we saw money not as a reward for our labor, but as a resource to amplify our living? What if legacy wasn't about what we passed down, but what we passed on: wisdom, wonder, beauty, bravery? What if the true measure of a life wasn't how little you spent, but how deeply you invested in people, in art, in truth? So ask yourself now, with no one watching, are you living or are you preserving? Are you building a life or are you stockpiling days that you'll never fully use? The reckoning is already happening. Every choice you make is writing your story. Every dollar you save or spend is casting a vote for the kind of life you believe you deserve. So write something breathtaking. Spend something that matters. Love someone loudly. Leave behind a trail of living so vibrant that when you're gone, people don't just say, they were smart with money. They say, they were alive. And that is a legacy worth everything.